I posted a survey a while ago where I asked the question if you would be willing to violate the laws of man, God, and nature if the results were wholesome. The point of this question is to juxtapose between laws that sound like they prevent you from doing something really immoral and unnatural, and the fact that you can violate each of these laws by doing something good. I do appreciate that you guys are willing to engage with the more ridiculous things that I post. It's very natural for you to wonder why I would ask such a question, because to be faced with such a moral dilemma sounds ridiculous. So let's talk about just such a situation. Let's say in a moment of weakness you transgress each of these laws in order to save a soft, fluffy puppy. Why would you do such a thing when the cost is so high? Let's say you're living in the Middle East and you come across a stray puppy while you're out walking around. You notice that it's cute and helpless and that there is no mother nearby, so you decide to adopt it. The only problem here is that dogs are considered unclean by Islam, and you just let an unclean creature lick you as you picked it up. You have violated your ritual purity for this. Let's just say for this scenario you were raised Muslim. By the way, even though this video deals with religion and morality, I've tried to make it respectful and non-offensive. Also, my intent is not to relentlessly criticize the beliefs of others. Rather, almost all of this is a result of a long process of examining my own beliefs and finding that they were not all true. Let's also say that you live in a predominantly Muslim country in which that they have passed a regional law that makes it illegal to keep pet dogs. You have also violated a law of nature because it is the natural order of things that animals unfit survival will inevitably perish. By preserving the life of a helpless creature, you have violated the laws of man, nature, and God. The reason that you probably don't feel bad about doing such a thing is because what you have done is not objectively immoral. No harm has come from it. So I want to ask you the question, what ultimately determines if an action is moral? Across all the religions, people will say that's an easy question. Just do as my religious text or oral tradition says and your actions will be moral. Everyone can't be right though, as the religions of the world significantly contradict each other. Since most of you viewers have been raised in the Judeo-Christian Western world, it's easy for you to not have any moral problems about owning dogs. It's easy for you to see the problems with other religions because you have likely been raised with the belief that other religions are fundamentally untrue. In other words, you are probably biased towards your beliefs and biased against other beliefs just like everyone else is. People generally don't think about this fact that their beliefs are influenced by such bias, and the purpose of this video is to largely give you a somewhat different perspective. So with that in mind, I want to ask you the next important question. If you do have this personal bias, how do you know that your beliefs are right and the beliefs held by others are wrong? For a lot of people, this is a difficult question to answer, as most people have never had their deeply held beliefs put under any significant scrutiny. To have someone put your beliefs under such scrutiny is very uncomfortable, and you would likely be personally offended by such a thing. Why is this the case, though? People are deeply invested in their beliefs, their identity, sense of self, and emotions can also cause that person to act defensively and hostile when you point out contradictions in their beliefs. Even worse, when your fundamental beliefs have been proven to be wrong, you experience a sort of helplessness and uncertainty as your sense of the world is shattered. You may also have cognitive dissonance, which is a sort of anxiety or stress that happens when you realize you hold two beliefs that directly oppose each other. So I've come to the conclusion that most people are unwilling to change their deeply held beliefs, even when confronted with a single example of indisputable evidence. This is based off my experience trying to defend my beliefs with actual experience against various people who said I was wrong in a given video. Arguing with a person about facts is not the best way to change their beliefs. It seems to me that you have to find the most gentle way possible to take out the individual flawed ideas that are holding up a larger incorrect belief. Once you've got that done, you need to suggest to them a better belief system that you've taken the time to back up with facts. Even this does not always work, though. At least it is a moral approach, because other people will try to use propaganda or coercion to change your mind. Going back to my original question, there are probably 3 types of people who would answer yes. I'm going to use the D&D alignment chart to illustrate this because it's a nice simplified way to understand morality. If you would violate these 3 laws out of pure selfishness, that would mean that you are probably not taking morality into account at all, which means that you are one of the evil alignments colored in red. If we are willing to violate 3 laws for good of others, then you are probably chaotic good, which I highlighted in green. If you have a perspective similar to mine and point out that these 3 laws don't inherently hold moral value over you, then you might be chaotic neutral, which I colored in purple. In other words, the reasoning and motive behind your actions determine whether you are a force of chaos versus order in the world, and whether your intent is moral or not. Being an unconventional individualist who values freedom above most anything fits the definition of chaotic neutral very well. The epitome of chaotic neutral is a person like this one, who will rope wild mountain lions and then snuggle them. That sort of chaotic behavior doesn't inherently bring harm or good to other people, which is an example of why chaos itself is not inherently immoral. Some people could argue that what he's doing is actually immoral because the cougars don't want to be snuggled, or you could argue that what he's doing is good because the cougars he catches are mostly sold to zoos that take good care of the animals. Just because there are endless ways of debating the morality of an action does not mean that those ways are actually helpful or valid in the first place. I also want to talk about how some of these laws or rules are self-violating. Since man is sometimes ignorant and contradictory in his beliefs, it's no surprise that the laws reflect that. What is less well known, though, is how there have been some instances of animals violating the natural order of nature. For example, an instance of deer and sheep interbreeding was investigated and found to be real by W.W. Blakesley of the United States Department of Agriculture. Most of these hybrids, unfortunately, did not live very long. Their fur was mostly white but containing light brown spots. The one hybrid that did live longer was a male and is shown here. He is considerably taller than a regular ram sheep and shed his deer antlers for ram horns in the fall of 1918. Domestic sheep are from the family of Bovidae, and deer are from the family of Cervidae, so there is no obvious reason why they should be able to produce offspring, yet this hybrid still existed. A sheep and a deer violated the laws of nature. You may disagree upon the definition of the laws of nature and say that this technically doesn't count as a violation, but that is a point of semantics, and I don't wish to argue about semantics pointlessly. Also, I'm allowed to define my concepts however I wish. Now, since a deer and a sheep violated the laws of nature, do you feel obligated to condemn them for their actions? Do you feel what they did was immoral, even if their offspring advanced science and did not detract from the amount of good in the world? In other words, even if their actions brought good into the world and a wholesome result, would you still condemn their actions as immoral? If you answered yes, why would you condemn a deer for immorality? The fact of the matter is that the laws of nature are not inherently moral. Nature is cruel and unforgiving. There are no antibiotics out in the wild, so animals may die slow, painful deaths from a simple infection. The laws of man are not always just and kind either. The laws of nature and the laws of men have no inherent moral value. What I mean by this is just because something is a law or a rule does not mean that it is moral and just. If you base your understanding of morality off of a specific religion, you might say something similar to what Dr. William Lane Craig does here. You might come to the conclusion that your beliefs are based off of transcendent, objective moral values. However, there are other religions, each with their own concepts of objective morality. To say that only one specific religion is correct and all the others aren't, that is a subjective decision. Which brings us to the point that anyone who believes that their religion is the only correct one, their morality is technically subjective because it's fundamentally based off of subjective beliefs. Religion is fundamentally based on faith and belief, not objective truth. This is why some fundamentalists believe that science is wrong about evolution and the age of the Earth. Objective secular morality says that some things are objectively harmful, like murder, and they are immoral independent of any religious beliefs. In comparison, theistic, faith-based morality says that morality ultimately comes from a deity and usually involves reading some religious text to determine what is moral. To me, it makes more sense to take an unbiased view of the possible harm that could come from your actions when determining what is actually moral. This is why I believe that objective morality is ultimately what determines if an action is moral or not. If you disagree with me, that's totally fine. I am willing to accept the possibility that I could be wrong. A point that I also want to emphasize here is that there is no way to prove that a religious text actually has a divine origin. Cliff Neckel makes that point well. Finally, to say that a particular religious text is true and then work backwards, creating your understanding of the world from that point, that is called backwards thinking. In other words, you may start with an idea or assumption and treat it as fact. Then you choose to find or create explanations of the world that only support your original belief. The reason that this is such an ongoing problem is because I and many of you have been raised to believe certain things and not to apply any critical thinking to those beliefs because our parents probably didn't want us to do that.